Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us in today's webinar. My name is Victoria Vasquez, and I am a client relationship consultant, and I'll be presenting this afternoon's topic. So before we get started on the topic, which today will be about processing rounds and sort of moving forward through the simulation, just a couple of housekeeping matters. First, as if you've been joining us for previous webinars, you know that these are recorded, so there's no need to take notes or anything like that. You can always find these on our website. And for today's discussion, it's just kind of a general discussion on how you manage your simulation. If you have really specific questions, I encourage you to get in touch with us after the webinar or your client relationship consultant directly so that we can talk about your industry specifically and sort of how you're doing it specifically for your course. But otherwise, general questions are certainly welcome, and you can ask questions on your control panel for the GoToWebinar. So as I was saying, we're going to discuss processing rounds today, and processing rounds is a necessary part of moving your simulation through the simulated years. Last week, my colleague Ronan talked a little bit about scheduling rounds and how that's part of managing your simulation. So I'll recap that a little bit, but I'm also going to focus on showing you how to sort of do it kind of immediately and do it as you need to do it in the simulation. We'll talk about a couple of options that are open and available to you when you do an immediate processing of your round. And then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for questions. So I'm going to log in here to my professor account. And today we're going to be looking at a capstone course. Not that there's a huge difference between capstone really foundation and our new simulation global DNA. They're all really going to look and feel the same. But just so you know, that's what we're looking at. All right, so from your course dashboard, if we had scheduled some rounds like we had discussed last week, those schedules would appear here in this part of the screen. So I'm going to quickly show you kind of just a recap of scheduling your round. You can do it for both practice and competition rounds. You'll enter a due date and a time, and you'll select auto process. This is how Ronan showed it last week, and this is what you would typically do if you've got sort of a set schedule for your course. You know when you want your rounds to be processed. You want to kind of let the simulation do the work for you. Another suggestion I have would be for you to make the times and dates that you're scheduling these rounds sort of repetitive. So for example, you know, making all the rounds due on Thursday at 11 p.m. Really helps students, I think, worry less about, you know, the due dates and kind of keeping track of those dates and focus more on the simulation. So that would be my one recommendation if you're looking to schedule rounds and auto process it. So talking a bit, so that's scheduling the rounds, and that's sort of letting, like I said, letting the simulation do the work for you. But in some cases, you may sort of want to have a little bit more control over when that happens. Maybe you're in a course where you are going to kind of see how long the students need to finish that round, and you want to process it immediately. So if you want to process your round immediately, you're going to go to Manage Industry and select Process Round. On this page, it'll ask you to sort of just kind of look at the information, make sure that at least one of your teams has uploaded decisions. we see that Team Andrews has uploaded decisions here, decisions last saved. You see a date there. And so we can continue to step 2. Step 2, continue through step 2 and then on to step 3. Here you'll be able to add an optional consulting, optional cash injection. So optional consulting would be like a fee. You could sort of play with your students and say, okay, if you ask me too many questions about the sim, or you ask me a question about the sim that I can find online in the materials, I'm going to charge you a consulting fee. This gives them some sort of incentive to do the research on their own before they use you as sort of a last result. And then you have this optional cash injection here that does the opposite. You're going to add some cash to that company. If you forget about either of these two, no worries. We have these little information boxes that kind of tell you exactly what that means. And also, they tell you how that cash or that consulting fee will appear on the cash flow statement. So in this case, I'm not going to do either of those two, and I'm just going to continue through. All right. So we see some preliminary results here, and finish it off with that continue to step 4 button. And now everything has been processed. So once everything is processed, you'll see that your dashboard has changed, some reports have been generated, right? The results are available. You also see in your scheduler, sort of like your list of rounds and the due dates, you'll see that it was processed. We just did a manual process, and the time that it was processed. So this is helpful sort of if you're wanting to kind of look back and sort of remember, okay, when was it and how long did I give my students in between the processing. Maybe that helps you for future course planning. So that is what you would do, simple step for processing. A quick little note on that too, when you manually process an industry, a round in an industry, keep in mind that you have to do it on a per industry basis. Sometimes professors may have courses that require or need them to split the course into 2 industries just because the group is a little bit larger. So maybe you have a group of 60 students, you don't want to put 10 students on a team, so you split that into 2 industries. Well, if you want to do a manual restart for both of the 2 industries, you'll have to do them individually. That's why you'll find the process round under Manage Industry, and when you're scheduling rounds and you're having them kind of go on an automatic, automatically, that will pertain to the entire course. So if you have 2 industries tied to 1 course, or 3 industries, or 4 industries, you'll only have to do it one time in the scheduler, or program it one time in the scheduler. So again, this kind of just goes back to that whole idea of when you schedule rounds and you use that option, you're letting the simulation really do the work for you. When you're choosing to do a manual restart, for example, you're really sort of saying, I need a little bit more control. So those are the differences between the two. So we've processed the round. We're opening that up into round 2 now. Your students immediately will be able to go in and make decisions for round 2. So what happens if you accidentally processed a round too soon and not everyone was finished? Well, that's a very simple kind of go back button is going to be to undo the round. And again, you'll go to Manage Industry. You'll have to undo a round on a per industry basis. So I'm going to undo this round because one of my team said that they had an emergency and couldn't quite get their decisions loaded in. So I'm going to believe them, and I'm going to undo this round. So remember, you're undoing the processing. You're not undoing any of the work that has been completed from those students. So my team Andrews was the only team that had decisions saved. Those decisions will still remain saved. Okay, so I I think that's really kind of it for processing the round, manually processing the round, a quick recap on how you process the round automatically. And so if anyone has any questions, this would be a great time to ask. We'll wait a little bit and see if anyone has anything that they'd like to talk about or discuss. All right. I often get a question about what happens when none of your teams have saved decisions. That's a very common question, and it's a good question. You're actually not able to process a round with only with none of your teams having updated official decisions. In other words, at least one team will have to have updated official decisions. If a team, you have at least one team to update official decisions and the rest have not, the rest of the teams will actually, the round will process on the last updated official decisions. So you can see that there would be a huge disadvantage to not getting your decisions in on time if you're going to move through rounds kind of, on those given deadlines. And then obviously, like I had covered in the undoing of the round, if for any reason you undo the round or you process the round and you need to undo it, that is always an option on an per industry basis. You would have to go in individually to each industry to do that. And so keep that in mind. Again, it's not going to erase any of the saved or updated official decisions of your students. It's only going to undo the processing of that round. All right, here we go. Let's see here. So here's a good question. Do I need to schedule a restart after the practice rounds in order for the class to advance to the competition rounds? You do. The scheduling a restart is basically, like I was talking about earlier, the difference between scheduling your rounds and manually processing your rounds. Basically, the takeaway is this, that you have to restart your simulation to move from practice rounds to competition rounds. So whether you want to schedule that ahead of the time and let the simulation do the work for you is one option. The other option is to do it kind of, on the fly and do it much like we just looked at processing the round manually. You can always manually restart each industry, and the distinction is the same. If you schedule a restart ahead of time, it applies to one course and however many industries you have in that course. But if you do a manual restart, you'll have to do it on a per industry basis. So really managing your industry gives you the flexibility to have more control over restarting, over processing rounds, and managing it through the course gives you sort of the ability to let the simulation sort of take over as long as you input those dates. So to schedule a restart, you would go to Manage Course and then Schedule Restart. And you would just kind of run through the steps, making sure to select what mode you want your simulation to restart in, selecting the date and time, and then following through the steps. That's Schedule a Restart. If you need a little more control over when that restart occurs, then you would go to Manual Restart under Manage Industry. So thank you for that question. I'll give you a couple minutes more in case there are any other questions. Otherwise, we'll kind of start wrapping up here. All right. I'm going to then go ahead and just go to our main web page here and just sort of show you a couple of things. Number one, how to get in contact with us. You go to our main website, you click on Contact. You see that our information's up here at top. To speak to support specifically, you just email us at support@capsim.com, or you can call us at either of these two numbers. The other thing too is where you want to go when you want to access any of these recorded webinars. So you'll go to our website, and under events, you will find webinars tab here. And you can click on past recordings. Today's recording will show up as soon as we can get it uploaded, so it'll show up in the next couple of business days. And then, of course, you can find out about our upcoming webinars that we'll be holding in the next couple of weeks. So thank you again, everyone, for joining. And if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me or your client relationship consultant or just our support line in general at any time.